Today on Quest, Chloe Bown, the founder of the popular Instagram page Take a Xanax. Life is a quest for logic and reason. It is a quest to find balance between science and faith. Life is a quest for knowledge and understanding. But most importantly, it's a quest for personal discovery. Whatever your quest, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Welcome to Quest. Hello everyone, I'm your host, Todd Fischer, and this is Quest. For those of you that might be new listeners, let me tell you a little about me. I'm the founder of Metacortex and the author of the best-selling book, Metacortex, The Grand Design. I'm a philosopher, a theorist, a metaphysicist. I'm a perpetual pupil of theology, and I'm an expert in comparative religious study. I've also extensively researched the mind-body connection, anatomy, and physiology. I documented over 300 case studies while researching my book, all from a scientific perspective, with cases that ranged from near-death and out-of-body experiences to possession to past life experiences, as well as the metaphysical, the paranormal, and other unexplained cases of a spiritual nature. This podcast will bring you some of those astonishing stories, and in some cases by the people that actually lived them. From time to time, I'll be talking about important, perhaps even controversial issues from both spiritual and scientific points of view. The world we live in is ever-changing, and there's often a conflict between spirituality and science, and I wanted to bring you this podcast to balance that equation. It will show you how we know what we know, and there's still so much we don't know. For me, curiosity is part of what makes us human. It's the joy of discovery. It's what drives us. It's our quest. During this time of quarantine, uncertainty, and ever-changing news, we've all had to learn how to live one day at a time, and often one moment at a time. While you've likely strengthened your ability to be present, there are probably also times when you find yourself future tripping or worrying about things that are out of your control. And when you start to feel that way, visit the Instagram page Take a Xanax for a little compassion and inspiration. Today, the founder, Chloe Bown, joins me and tells me about her own experiences during quarantine and lockdown. Have a listen. Welcome to the show, Chloe.
Thank you.
And I wanted to kind of dive into this because now we're going to get into Take a Xanax in a little bit, but I kind of came across this Instagram page and I saw all these little pearls of wisdom, some you pulled from other places, some words that are your own. And I just thought, wow, there's something here.
Right.
And she's captured something. And I wanted to message you and just kind of get a sense of what you were about. And I certainly wanted to have you on the show and talk to you. So let's kind of kick this off with, tell me where you're from. What was your life like growing up?
Okay, so I grew up in New York City on the Upper East Side. Went to the same school from when I was 3 years old to when I graduated high school. So was pretty much with the same people for as long as I could remember. Obviously new people filtered in, but I went to Horseman, which is college preparatory school in the Bronx. So I would commute every day from the city to the Bronx.
Wow.
And I have two little sisters. I live with my mom. My parents got divorced when I was, 11 years old. So up until that point, we were all in the same place. And then after that, my dad moved out and he also lives close by, but, we see him every so often. It's like when we were little, we had more of like a set schedule, but now that we're older, it's kind of more like free flowing.
Right.
But yeah.
and you're in college now, right?
Yeah. So I'm not even, yeah, and the structure is mainly for my littler sister who's still in middle school, but I am in college. I go to Tulane in New Orleans. Um,
What year are you in?
I'm entering my junior year.
How did COVID and quarantine affect the university for you this year? Did you have to leave school early? What happened there?
Yeah, so we basically New Orleans was hit pretty bad, but it had a delayed kind of recognition of corona. So kind of when it was getting really bad in New York and everyone was starting to talk about it on the East Coast, no one was really talking about it in Louisiana. My mom actually came to visit me like probably the week before everything shut down, and I remember her saying to me, it's so calm here. It's almost like no one's panic buying toilet paper. It's almost like there's just no pandemic here. But what I told her, which ended up being true, was that there was just a delay in the testing because like obviously the resources in New Orleans versus New York City, like the way to get
Right.
testing, it took a lot longer for the testing to arrive. I told her as soon as you go back, there's going to be, and they start to get testing, you'll see the Mardi Gras surge of cases that came in, and this place will be rampant with it. And so within a week, they started getting cases, and once there was like the first like few confirmed cases, that in university like emailed everyone and told them to prepare for online instruction and prepare to have to pack up and leave if it gets to that point. And then like within a day or two they basically told us we had a week to move out. And so most of us don't live in the South, so most of us were traveling like back on airplanes, and just the stuff with the airports and was already getting complicated, so it was stressful. Literally packing up everything within a few days and then getting home. But I had such an urgency to get home because I didn't know, I wanted to get there before things got worse because I knew that New York City was really going on lockdown and I didn't want to like somehow get locked out. So
It
I
must
kind
have
of,
been it must have been terrifying to go to New York, which was like the hotbed of.
yeah, it was really counterintuitive for me leaving New Orleans because it was so much more laid back there at that point. But at the same time, I needed to be home and like in the safety of like just be around the people that I trust. And also being on a college campus when there's a pandemic spreading, like there's nothing more dangerous than that because
Oh
there's
yeah.
people everywhere. And like the dining halls and the dorms and like everything is just like an incubator for it to spread. So I knew that even though New York was bad, that I would be safer like in my own apartment. So I just very quickly booked a flight and gave myself like 2 or 3 days to pack up everything. Um, and then I left. Um, and yeah, and I got back around like March 16th. Um, and then we had the rest. We had like a week of no classes just to get everyone settled, and then we resumed like online classes for the
Yeah.
rest of the semester.
What about the fall? Will you be going back?
So I currently their plan is to have us coming back. Have we're supposed to basically come a little earlier than we would have and then leave earlier so that instead of having Thanksgiving break and then coming back and taking finals and then doing winter break, we're combining Thanksgiving and winter break so that there's less back and forth. So basically our semester is going to start in mid-August and then it's going to end over Thanksgiving, and then we have no breaks in between so that people aren't like going back and forth. Um,
Right.
but honestly, every day things change, and like there I've been seeing recently resurgences there, so it's hard to even count on anything. Like I'm honestly just I have to prepare myself to know that we could easily be like sent home in the middle of the semester if there's a spike, you know.
That's true. That's true. So we've talked about kind of how COVID affected university for you. And I think that, social distancing and isolation, those things have real evidence-based harms that we have to account for when it comes to calculating the risks and the benefits of quarantining the entire country. And then obviously there will be subsequent kind of psychological, biological, and even economic consequences that follow quarantining an entire country. I'm
Right.
curious, so how did quarantine affect you personally? Was this, obviously this is something that you had no idea. A year ago, if someone would have told you the country would be shutting down, that has to have affected you greatly. How did it affect you personally? Did you get depressed? Where you have just been kind of in awe of this or stunned by it? How do you feel personally?
Honestly, I think it was definitely a roller coaster of emotions, and I've seen it go either way for a lot of my friends, but I think for me specifically, I wasn't loving my time at school, just like kind of a long story, but my time at Tulane has been a little bit turbulent. It wasn't really my first choice school, not my perfect fit. And I've definitely made the best out of it, but I've had like a tough time there finding my place socially and finding the right network of friends. So when I was like told, you have to leave, I wasn't as down as a lot of my friends from home were to leave their respective schools because they, are living that college, I guess, stereotype of like having the best time. And that just hasn't really been my experience.
Sure.
So I wasn't necessarily upset to come home to my family and like spend like that needed time. So that
Sure.
aspect was not a letdown, but definitely the shift of like of just having nothing to do and having to structure my days completely by myself, that was really hard for me because someone with like depressive tendencies and obsessive compulsive tendencies like I have, like to have to I really do rely on like the structure of school and the work week to like keep me going. And once I didn't have that, even though I had like online school, it was very lax and it wasn't much structure, and it was hard for me to kind of get motivated to like have a day that felt meaningful, and it was just easy for me to just kind of like slip into you know dark places that way. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, and then I also think the other part of it is the anxiety of like not knowing what's going on, and like I've always been like a classic hypochondriac. So like if you put me in a pandemic, like that's obviously not going to be easy, but I also do think those tendencies kind of helped me because I've always been that way versus some people who like have never been that way and then they're like thrown into this and for the first time they're like freaking out about hand sanitizer and everything. Like I was always kind of that way in general, but it definitely wasn't easy on my anxiety because there's just literally no answers, and that's something that I don't do well with, like not being able to predict anything about what's going to happen. And my whole obviously my whole sophomore year got halted, and then I was supposed to be going abroad next fall, junior year, and
Wow.
now that's canceled, obviously.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's unfortunate. Did you watch the news at all when you were in quarantine? Or did you
Yeah,
stay away
I
from the news?
I honestly, my mom would have it on like normally like the 6 p.m. news, or like if Trump would do a briefing, she would normally have it on, and I would watch when I was, not doing schoolwork, just because I wanted to know like the most pertinent recent information, whether it was like, oh, this is the new protocol that everyone's going to have to follow, or like the expectation of when things were going to reopen. I was just like interested in what he was giving out, and also just seeing like the numbers go up or down, like was like I felt like was important to keep myself like informed. But there was definitely a time where I couldn't do it every night, and I definitely, when I was on social media, tried to stay away from like reading the news articles, just because I was already seeing it on TV. I didn't want to just keep reading about it because it's like became too overwhelming.
Oh yeah, yeah. Did it upset you to see the death tolls, to see how quickly people were being taken with this? Did that bother you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it bothered everyone, but it started to bother me more when it became, closer and closer to home. Because at first you hear like it's, taking the older generation who were already not like living healthy lives, and you're kind of like, okay, I guess that makes sense. But like as it progressed, it was like your friend's aunt and like your mom's cousin and like all the just so many people you knew ended up having a scare, if not having it. And like it just became so personal to everyone. And that's when I started getting really freaked out about it, because I
Yeah.
mean, like my dad, coworkers, one of his bosses like died of corona, and just like stuff like that became really real. And yeah, I think it's hard to digest, especially being from New York City. There was like literally a morgue right down the block from my apartment,
Yeah.
because I actually live right next to a hospital. Lenox Hill Hospital is like a block away from my apartment on 78th and Park. So there was like crazy stuff on that block. Like we did well by not being there during those like 8 weeks, because it was like madness.
It was very weird to see Jacob Javits Center be a hospital and, a naval vessel parked in the river, and like to see, tents set up in Central Park was very surreal to see that. It was like a weird movie. Like it was like
Mm-hmm.
something that you would swear Hollywood made up, that it was
Honestly,
real.
I'm sure there will be in the future some movies, if there's gonna have to be, like something documenting this time.
Yeah. Yeah. There's already movies that are happening right now that are like how dealing with quarantine or this
Yeah.
virus, or things that are similar, that are like the Hollywood virus that they'll go and do this with. It'll be. Was it tough to not see your friends? Are you a social person?
I mean, I definitely missed my friends, in the sense of like, it would have been nice to like go out for dinner and not have dinner at home every single night, and like have like more breakups in my day, just to sort of like, I don't know, structure it a little more. But it wasn't, for me, because my network isn't really at school, it's more at home. It wasn't that challenging, because I'm used to being like long distance with my closest friends, because
I
obviously
see.
I go to school and we all go to different schools. So like when we were all in quarantine, they actually had more time to talk. So it was honestly not like, for me it wasn't like, oh my god, I'm cut off from everyone. A lot of my closer friends suddenly had all the time in the world. So it was kind of nice in that respect. But I think for a lot of them who do have a very full network of friends at school, like they were missing that constant company, and like, just never being alone.
Right. For the last 3 months, we've really all been having a collective shared experience, and all humans right now are able to feel that collective energy of the circumstances that we have. And at least during my verbal connections with people during quarantine, I think they felt this. There's been this shared experience of feeling the magnitude of all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's feeling it. And for people that don't really know, a shared experience is just really something that at least two or more people experience together. So when you have something like what happened on 9/11, that was a collective shared experience with not only people that were on the Manhattan Island, but when people witnessed it all over the news. There were so many people that will always have that recollection of that day. It's a
Mhm.
collective shared experience. And those are events though that you earmark a day, you know, and it's like, I remember that day. This is, I remember that 3 months. And so
Right.
it's a much different experience, right? And I think one of the things that's important about this is to provide the opportunity for validation that what you're experiencing is exactly what another person is experiencing. And a lot of
Right,
people
for
don't
sure.
really see that. And it's that shared reality, and that there's unknowns with that reality. And the validations of what you experience and feel is natural and normal. It's a natural and normal reaction to these circumstances. So
Yeah,
whatever you're
definitely.
feeling is really kind of the right way to feel, you know? And I wanted to kind of take this moment and kind of echo that message in a more zoomed out sense and emphasize that right now, this pandemic is a global shared experience. We
Mhm.
really haven't experienced anything like this before. And we did isolate, and many people are still in isolation, and we will most likely have to isolate again, which is unfortunate. And we're all able to feel this. And how you feel in response to this is natural and valid. And so I'm curious, you know, with going to be just running on and talking about this, are you a spiritual person? Was your spirituality affected by this in any way?
Well, honestly, I mean, I didn't grow up religious, so spirituality kind of came to me later when my mom got really into yoga and crystal healing and all of the different forms of spirituality that she practices that are kind of mainly like Buddhist practices, I would say. Um, when she got really into it, that became just like kind of a part of our house and our lives. And that, like, I think started me um, on my own, like, journey with it. But I think leaving for school and like being on my own for the first time was like when I had to start relying on it more. Um, just because I mean, it's all up to me, obviously, like how I'm gonna keep going when I'm at school. It's like I'm the one in charge, and that's like there were times that I definitely just like had to like slow it down and like take a deep breath and like clutch a crystal and like do whatever I do that most people wouldn't understand, but sometimes you just have to do it.
Yeah.
Um and but I don't think corona necessarily like I mean, if anything, it probably brought it out a little bit more because I was doing a lot of yoga with my mom. Like she would do like weekly or every few days she would do like a session with me and my sisters. Um and would kind of just practice her sessions on us. So that was like a good way of connecting with it during
Yeah.
like all the turbulent times.
I like to ask people that question because I find it interesting. And in some cases, people's faiths and spiritualities have been strengthened by this kind of worldly event. And then some people have lost their faith through it, you know? And it's been interesting. You know, there's that old saying, there's no atheists in a foxhole, you know? And when you're
Mhm.
up against a virus that there is no cure for, hardly any treatment, no one's sure about the testing. It seems like every symptom that there is on the books can be COVID. Oh, my elbow itches. Oh, you probably have COVID. You know, I mean, it's like,
Right.
it's that silly. It's like, it's anything. I have a stomach ache. Oh, it could be COVID. You know, it could just be that I ate too much pizza, but it could be COVID. Like everything, no matter how minor, could be so it's like, wow, you know. But a lot of people started praying because this was a fatal illness that was just like wildfire. Every day you just saw those numbers double everywhere, all around the world, and like it's crazy to see what it was. And then there were certain people that's like, well, this is it, we're checking out, it's the end. It's been really weird to hear different people's opinions on where their spirituality has been at. I
Yeah.
normally hear though that they've actually grabbed for spirituality more,
Yeah.
or started to kind of transit that way, or it's been strengthened more than I hear the opposite. But I always like to, I'm always curious to know, especially with young people, because what my Metatomics book has actually appealed to young people more than any demographic. And it's an odd situation because I think a lot of young people didn't want to, either because of their parents not putting them through any kind of real organized religion, they just don't have an experience with it, or they have shied away from it because kind of the news always paints a terrible picture of organized religion, and there's a lot of bad press that hounds, different religions and faiths. And I think people stay away from it, but they want to be spiritual. And then they find a different way to approach it. And that's what kind of what my book is it approaches it in a different way. But I sometimes wonder if, we're kind of losing religion to the youth now, and we're gaining spirituality, or whether we're losing on all those fronts. So I'm always curious, but certainly a worldwide pandemic of something is probably a good way for people to start thinking, if there's a higher power, I might want to start talking to that person.
Right.
Because, but yeah, so you mentioned you practice yoga.
Yeah.
So was that effective in helping you during your quarantine period? Did yoga help you just through the boring periods? Did it help you keep a good frame of mind? Was the breathing that helped you? Was it a physical or a mental perspective that yoga particularly gave you? What was the benefit?
Honestly, I think it just came down to moving my body and mind, like just getting myself up to do something that I knew was good for my body and mind. Like I knew that I would get something out of it, even if I just wasn't in the mood, or I would rather just do nothing. I would always, my mom would encourage me to do it with her. And even if I didn't take much out of it, like emotionally, sometimes it was a good way to make sure I was still moving in like my days that I was obviously not doing much. But emotionally, I think also just like reflecting and staying present and trying to cancel out all the noise going on was really effective. And I mean, my mom's a lot better at it than I am, but learning from her was good. And I think it kind of bonded like me and my sisters and my mom.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I get that. So so I'm glad to hear that. I practice yoga too. And I know what it does for me. I'm always curious what it does for other people, because sometimes I don't need the physical, I need the mental perspective of it. I need the breathing of it. But I'm always in, and I think probably one of the best things that you could be doing during COVID anyways. And from a breathing perspective, it definitely helps your lungs, keeps your lungs strong.
Right.
With the fatal end of COVID being what happens in your lungs, that is not a bad tool to have to strengthen your lungs, Anyways, I want to move on to Take a Xanax. So I came across your Instagram page, and immediately, and there weren't a whole lot of posts on it, but I immediately liked the things you were putting on there. And occasionally I have come across Instagram pages where I'm just like, man, this is being fueled by something. I just kind of had a sense that like you're connected into something where you're finding the words to put out that people need to hear. So I wanted to reach out to you and talk to you about it and tell you what I thought about it. And I wanted to kind of get into that right now, because I think this is something really cool that could be big. I think a lot of people are going to want to go to this and see it. And I think it's important. And even you have a kind of catchy hook name for it, which is great.
Right.
So tell me about Take a Xanax. You told me it started 6 months ago. So it started pre-COVID.
Yeah.
So why did you start it, and who does it appeal to?
So I started it literally right before the new year. Like it was like December 28th, and I was on winter break, and I was thinking, what are my goals for the new year, or like what's something I can incorporate into my life and my next semester at school and just in general that'll keep me more grounded. Like I was just searching for something to keep me grounded. I felt like my first semester of sophomore year was a little rocky, and I don't know, I felt like I had been doing a lot of writing, and that was really cathartic for me. And sometimes I would even share my writing with different people, whether it was like a family member or a friend, just like, oh, I wrote this little piece about anxiety. Like, I know you get anxious sometimes. Does this resonate with you? And sometimes I would just share things that I wrote with certain people. And then after a while, people just would always respond with such, like, I don't know, emphasis on how much it really did resonate with them, and how I should write a book or I should write a blog, or would make jokes all the time, like, oh my God, you should like become a blogger. And I always kind of fed into it as a joke as well. But then I was like, what if I actually did this? What if I like started small and used Instagram? Because obviously, like, many people in my generation have like second Instagrams. They have their personal accounts, and they have like a food account or a workout account or an art account or singing or
Right.
whatever their interest is. Like, a lot of people my age do that. So I knew that would be a good way of starting off small. So that's when the idea came to me, and I started just like writing posts about my just stuff that was going on in my head, I guess. I think I was building up for a while over the fall, writing these entries, just not really knowing what to do with them. And then when I actually started it, I finally had that medium, because I think I felt like my personal Instagram followers might not need that content from me, might not be interested in it, but then I could have another place where the people that were interested in it could go, and I could be some kind of influential voice if possible.
Sure.
So yeah, then I started it, and I got good feedback at the beginning, but it was mostly from just like close friends and family. Like, it wasn't really anyone that out of the box. It didn't really get recognized by other people until I would say like March, when I started posting about COVID, and people were really looking for something to ground them and really just scared out of their minds. And it was actually like a lot of my sorority sisters randomly like found it and started sharing it and like sending it to each other, which I guess is one of the benefits of being in a sorority, because I'm not a huge sorority girl, but I think that network did a lot for me, because they started sharing it and commenting on it and asking for more, and just were really supportive of it. So that got me some more momentum, and I got some more followers during the quarantine. But I don't know, it really, sometimes I'll post something that I'll put a lot of energy into, that I'll spend hours writing, and it'll get like 15 likes, and like no one will really comment, or so it's really a hit or miss sometimes. And there are many times that I will go through the effort of posting, and then I feel like discouraged when I don't get a lot of, I guess, validation from it. But then I have to remind myself that obviously that's not the point. It's not like I'm not doing this just to be validated. Like, I'm doing this to hopefully,
Yeah.
have a cathartic outlet for me, but also have an impact on other people. And that's not always something that you're going to get validation for.
Right. And also the Instagram algorithm that keeps people from getting comments sometimes. You just never know how you wind up in someone's feed. Like
Right.
it changes constantly. So you can't beat yourself up over the likes, because sometimes it's just technology that keeps that from
Right.
happening.
Yeah.
What's your plans for Take a Xanax? Is this going to expand?
Honestly, I don't know entirely. Like, I feel like right now I'm cool with the Instagram thing, just like just because I feel like I'm pretty good with Instagram. I've ran other social media accounts for, different clubs or organizations I was a part of, and I feel like I can manipulate that pretty well. But, I think if I eventually gain a bigger following, because right now I really like have 150 followers, it's like, and it's all people I know. It's not really anyone that like has never met me before. So if I were to randomly get a bigger following, maybe I would transition that into, not social media, maybe like an actual blog online. But I haven't really gone down that road yet just because it doesn't seem like there's a need for it yet.
Sure,
But
sure.
I mean, one thing I have thought a lot about is like trademarking the name just because it's like a good name, and like I feel like I could like eventually do something with it.
Yeah. Your words of wisdom certainly reached me. I felt your choices of inspiring or moving messages were particularly striking a chord during the quarantine. I asked you if you wouldn't mind stepping out from behind the post and introducing yourself. How did you feel about that when I asked you to do that? Because you kind of weren't really, you weren't really talking from you. It was more just the words on the page. Do you remember when I asked you about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I liked having the anonymous factor to it because I wanted it to seem like it wasn't just this girl that everyone who was following knew as like Chloe, but also like just this kind of like alter ego blogger sort of in a
Sure.
way. So I
Yeah.
kind of liked the anonymous to just kind of go into that role and not it be like, hi, I'm Chloe, like you know me, you know everything about me, and here's like my blog. But then I started to realize that when I did make it more personal, like people responded to it better. And so I just tried to lean into that more and like talk more from tangible experiences as opposed to just like wisdom that comes from like, abstract concepts. Like I tried to be more personable with it, and I think that definitely was effective. I just, in terms of like actually like posting pictures of myself, I felt like that wasn't really
Oh no, no,
necessary
no, no,
because
no.
like I didn't need to like show like my face. I just really needed to start talking from, my perspective.
Exactly, exactly. That's exactly what I wanted. And I remember like one of some of the first posts that you made like that, and they were just like really incredible. And what I like about that is people can have that same type of shared experience. Like oh, I went through that, and it's not just anonymous words anymore. And you
Right.
can connect more to the site and who's behind it. And that's what I like about it, when I think is so valuable. Chloe, there are a lot of voices being heard today, for sure. And to say it's a turbulent time is an understatement. But the way you reach people could make you a voice of a generation. It really could. And
That feels extreme, but thank you.
and not as one that commands and leads as a lot of the voices are that we hear today, but rather one that like listens and offers compassion and inspiration. And that's what you could be. That's what this could go to. I really
Yeah.
believe that.
And
And
I totally like that's always been the goal,
yeah,
even though deep down it started as something I wanted to do for my own catharsis. It was always that because I felt like I had an ability to get through to people, whether it was one on one or me in a group setting. I felt like I was able to talk to people in a way that got a message across. I think that also came from the fact that I've been in therapy for so many years and I've had to like learn all of those skills of communication, and they come pretty naturally to me, and like vulnerability and oversharing is just not something I like shy away from. But even with that, I felt like I had something valuable to say and to put out there.
Yeah, you absolutely do. So how can people find you on social media? Where are you at out there in the internet world?
So my Instagram account is at take a Xanax, but between each word there's a period just for,
Okay.
I don't know, phonetically it just made more sense. But
Yeah.
um yeah, so if anyone's interested in like reading through my posts, I have around like 20 posts that I've kind of will do one every 2 weeks, even though that doesn't seem that often. It's because of the fact that I will like wait for something striking to write something about, and then not even like an event, just more like a theme for a post. And I like to take my time in coming up with a theme, and I do appreciate the fact that they are sometimes long and not everyone's going to read something I post every day. So
Sure.
I do them kind of every 2 weeks or so, but I story things every so often that I find that are relevant, whether it's like to mental health or wellness or just general like spirituality, um, yoga, or just lifestyle, like things that are keeping me going during these times, that I think will be valuable to other people. So yeah, so I'm always pretty active even when I'm not posting. Um, but yeah.
What's your outlook for the next 6 months? Today we're recording this podcast on July 2nd, which is the exact halfway point of the year, and we've had a heck of a year up to this point.
I
For the
know.
next 6 months, are you hopeful for what's to come? Are you worried about what's to come?
Honestly, I don't think I'm one way or the other. I feel like we have come out of a really dark place that I think is only gonna help propel us forward. But that doesn't mean that I don't have fear going forward, because I obviously there's just really no telling what the pattern of this will be, and I don't know how it's gonna affect like school and day-to-day life. But I do think that like if we have made it through like the entire shutdown, I don't see why like easing back into everyday life should be that difficult, just because in my just for my perspective that was the complete shutdown and the complete uprooting of everything. So I mean, I'm definitely anxious and unsure, but I also selfishly I'm glad that when I go back to school there won't be as much pressure to, be on all the time, to be going to parties every night, or you know being
Right.
so motivated in school. I think it's nice that everyone did slow down for a bit, and I'm hoping that those effects will be seen more long term. That's like what I'm kind of curious to see, if like that actually takes shape. Um, but yeah, so I honestly think it's like hard to say. Like there's not a clean cut answer, but I've all
Do you
kind
have,
of different
do you,
emotions on it.
yeah, no, I understand. I totally do. Do you have a piece of advice you'd offer to someone your age or younger that really was probably the thing that helped, guide you through this, or someone who's in a dark place at a dark time? What's your words of wisdom to that person?
Well, I think it kind of drawing back on what you said earlier, I was gonna say it and then you kind of said it perfectly, but there's no right way to do this. And I think that that's been my biggest takeaway and my biggest piece of advice I've said to literally anyone is that if you're feeling down or anxious, or even you're feeling positive things, like you're feeling relaxed, you're feeling comfortable, or you're whatever you're feeling is okay. And like there's no guidebook for this, and everyone is actually in a universal experience but are experiencing that subjectively. And I think that's really important because everyone, even though we're all in a pandemic and we're all in quarantine, like each of our circumstances at home and in our lives are just so different, and those impact like what the last 3 months have been like. So I've just been really preaching to everyone, like, respect that your experience is not the same as someone else's, and if it's going to take them longer, or if it's going to take you longer to find like your normalcy, that's okay. And just kind of be patient with yourself and with everyone, because it's a collective trauma. Like, it's not something that is just gonna, you're just gonna bounce back from right away. But like, any of the feelings and the thoughts and the emotions it stirs up are so normal. So I think just reminding yourself of that and just trying to refocus going forward without blaming or judging yourself for not being, totally there right away.
Right. That's great. That's great advice. This world is going to keep changing, pandemic or not. But please keep your influence through Take a Xanax, something that people can rely on and be comforted by. And those are the words I have to leave you with, is keep going with it. And keep building the audience, because it's truly needed. It really is, Chloe.
Yeah, I hope you're right, and I hope there will be more traffic on it. I think it's just right now, it's a bizarre time, but I hope that going back to school, maybe there'll be some more people interested in seeing what I have to say.
Yeah, keep telling stories, keep thinking stuff up.
Yeah.
I'm really happy that you came on the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
You have a good day, okay?
Yeah.
Take care. Bye-bye.
And there you have it, Chloe Bown. Please go follow her page. I think you'll like it. Thanks for listening today. Thank you for listening to Quest. Please be sure and rate and review this podcast. This podcast is copyright. Any previously trademarked or copyright content is used by permission. Be sure to visit the official website for the International Association of Metatomics at metatomics.org, or find us on social media for other unique content. And make sure to pick up a copy of the book that started a spiritual revolution, Metatomics, The Grand Design, available for sale online and at most major bookstores. Thanks for listening.